Hey, you guys, it's me, Bonnie, your host of the Grieving Girl podcast. And today we have Alexis with us. Woo! Yes. So everybody,
Sore.
it's a Friday. We love Fridays. First midday Friday chat I've ever done. And also first time difference, opposite coast vibe. So
Yep.
Alexis, thanks for joining us here
Totally.
from the West Coast.
I left New York and now feel like a cool girl.
Yeah, I know, right? You're like, hey, lived in Harlem for a million years. How are we liking the West Coast?
We absolutely, unequivocally love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing. And listen, I will always be a Harlem girly. I lived there, if you include New York in college, like I was there for 13 years, and it will always have a
Mm-hmm.
super special place in my heart. But I have always wanted to live out here, and I feel like I'm fulfilling like a childhood dream. And I'm genuinely the happiest I've been my whole life. So
I was gonna say, all the sunshine, I feel like at least baseline that is working for you.
it definitely helps. Well, I get to garden all year round, and that's like, we'll talk about like, ways you grieve later, but like gardening, and I'm a Capricorn. I love like earth, like things
Yeah.
taste like earth. I like to put my hands in earth. So that's great.
Yeah. Yeah, we love that. All right. Well,
Yeah.
speaking of grief, let's get going. So, if you don't mind, would you share with us your relationship to grief the way we're going to speak about it today?
Yeah, for sure. So I mean, I feel like you are grieving your whole life, but my grief journey really
Mm-hmm.
started with when my dad passed away. We're actually coming up on 8 years. And had just turned 25, I think. It happened very quickly. I wasn't privy to a lot of information when it happened because I was fulfilling my dad's lifelong dream of someone in the family becoming an actor, and he
Mm.
didn't want me to come home, so he kind of asked people not to talk about how sick he was for a long time until about 2 weeks before he passed away, and then, but my mom was like, "You got to call her, you got to tell her." So that's kind of where my grief journey began, and then since then. Um, I've just had quite a bit of hardship. I actually was lucky enough to be my grandmother's end of life caregiver during the
Mm.
pandemic, which we can definitely talk about. And I say lucky enough because something I really want to touch on today is like how grateful I am for grief. Um, but yeah, and now like, my life has flashed and I'm 32 years old and I am a woman now, and I feel like grief took the last bit of my innocence away from me, but I also think it gave me a lot too. So,
Yeah. Did your what? I know your dad was sick. Did he have cancer? Like, what did?
yeah, so he had liver cancer. He actually died
Okay.
of a very specific type of cancer called cholangiocarcinoma, which happens, it's like a tiny, sort of microscopic like cancer that's in the very small organs of your body. And ultimately, that's what they said had passed. But liver cancer, if your liver has enough damage, is kind of a death sentence. Um,
Mm.
and and it's tough because the liver is like an incredibly regenerative organ, but he, previous to having liver cancer, had hepatitis for a long time, and he was a part of the trial, or he was a contestant, what's the word for it?
Uh, Candidate?
He was a candidate for the
Recipient.
recipient of the trial for the hepatitis medication you can now get over the counter. And
Okay.
he was like sort of cured of it, and then a few months later, polyps started showing up on his liver, and then it ended up being cancerous. And the way he told me was terrible. Couldn't have been handled worse, in my humble opinion. um, but I love him. He was never great with words. So
Yeah. Honestly, this is like, I have heard this kind of story
yeah,
previously.
Yeah.
of people, and this is like the grieving of the person with the illness too, of like already themselves grieving, facing end of life. How do I tell my kids? What am I going to say? Do I tell them? Do I not? I don't want them to worry. But then also in doing that, stealing some closure and grief from the person that has to stay here. It's
Yeah.
such an interesting conversation because I have had some very just parallel conversations of like they didn't tell me and then it was too late and then I was just like blindsided and
So here's the deal with how I went through this journey. So it was, I think it was March 25th, 2016. He was like, I
mm-hmm.
need you to come home. I need to take you out to dinner and have a conversation with you. And I don't know where my sister was at the time, but he took me and my brother Keegan to a really nice restaurant in this town called Ipswich, which is near where I grew up, and ordered us top shelf whiskey. And when we each had the glass in our hand, he was like, well, I got cancer. And Keegan and I were like, oh my God, what? And I love whiskey. So this was a personal offense. I was like, I can't ever taste whiskey the same way again.
Yeah, you're like, thank you for ruining this top shelf whiskey for me
But
forever.
so then we started going through, and there were so many things which I'm sure you can relate to that went wrong in his care process with hospitals, with doctors. Um, uh, I don't know that there was any true malpractice, but I think if there had been an earlier intervention, things could have ended up differently. But we went through this whole year where it was like, will he, won't he? How's he doing? We're not sure. He was always a jokester. So he would like, if he went through a radiation treatment and he couldn't be around the dog for 2 days, he'd be like making jokes about being radioactive. And, but so towards the end of his time on Earth, I got my very first equity gig. I was so excited. I got cast in a play. It was called I and You. It was at Theater Squared in Arkansas, and I had the absolute pleasure of working with Jelani Aladdin, who's like one of the most prolific actors I've ever worked with and learned from. And God bless him for putting up with me through that time, because the play was literally about a girl who was dying of liver failure
Ah,
while I was going through the process of actually losing my dad in real life from liver cancer. So I was
yeah,
living like if the universe wanted me to deal with grief, whoa,
yeah,
baby, I dealt with it.
yeah.
So, and then he passed away about 3 days after the show closed.
Oh shit. Oh god.
Yeah. And
Yeah, that's rough.
yeah, it was. And I was so young. Like you just never imagine. I mean, you lost your dad very young, but like you just never
Mm-hmm.
imagine that happening. You hate to, always say, you hate to see your heroes fall. And he fell fucking hard.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. And then it was this whole complicated thing, which kind of, I always say I think it was a really important time for me because I was a child when I lost him. I was very young. I wasn't equipped to like handle estates and be an executor and do all these things that I actually, we had to sign our rights over to my aunt to kind of take care of the um, estate. And I don't have a relationship with
mm,
her anymore. And I feel very badly for that because one things my dad made me promise him before he passed away was that I would keep my relationship with her. And I tried really hard for a long time to do that. And then ultimately just had to
yeah,
like say, hope you will forgive me because I can't. But,
yeah,
but everything did not, everything worked out and didn't work out the way I wanted to. He died while I was in Japan visiting my now husband. And I basically was there for 3 days and then had to turn around and come home for the funeral because my aunt didn't honor my dad's wishes to wait till I came back to hold a service. And so I had to come back, and then that just kind of started a very long and tumultuous couple years because he also didn't have a will set in stone. And if there's one thing, if you are listening to this podcast, get
like
your
literally.
shit together. If you were 30, go to speak with a lawyer and figure out your will, and then change it
Yep.
every 5 years. Like, you do not put your living people through that. I love him, but he really like did that one bad.
I mean, that's just like in general. I mean, my mom was in the process of getting her will done and she
Right.
didn't. And like, thank God my sister and I are very on the same page. But like, that's a whole season. I will do a season called The Business of Death because it's just so important. Like you're saying, I mean, your aunt not waiting in general would have been the straw for me, especially in the grief. I would have been like, "You're wild, get out of here!" Like that's done. So it's nice that you even tried really hard to honor your dad's wishes and keeping the relationship. But that would have been it for me.
Yeah, and you know, this is something I really wanted to talk about with regard to that chapter of the grief, which is that again, I was a kid and I was handling
Right.
it like a kid would. And she came from a different time. She came from a different background. My grandparents were like first generation and like came over on the boats to America from Italy, like just a totally different life. And she had to grow up a lot earlier than I ever did. And so now that I'm 32 and I have space from it all, I know that I'll never have the opportunity to say this to her. And I'm going to get emotional because I think everybody deserves forgiveness and a second chance if they warrant it. And I wish that I could tell her that, like, now as an adult, I know, and for being a caregiver for my grandmother, like, I cannot imagine how hard that was for her to have to give up her life to do that for 3 years. And I do wish I could apologize because there's no right way to grieve. There isn't. It doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't matter what you're going through. But I definitely think, like, had it happened and I was 32, I would have handled it a lot differently than when I was 25.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course. 100%. Especially like just grief in general, like your brain is doing crazy shit. And then, the younger you are, like it is totally different and it's totally true. So like,
Yeah.
you
I have a question
got to
for
give
you,
yourself
though.
grace in that situation too.
I have a question for you, though. What
Yeah.
when you first started like your serious grieving, was there anything
Mm.
that your body stopped doing? Like for me, I had really weird. My thing was like I would constantly accidentally leave my hot water pot like on. I would just forget that I was boiling it. I think I went through like 12 pans over the first like 2 years that I was with my dad because like my brain stopped working. Like when you lose a
Yeah.
parent, I
Grief
think
brain.
when you lose a parent, it's just like it's almost like your body like is connected to them in some way energetically, and then like you have to relearn how to do a lot of things. Like he taught me how to make my bed. I literally forgot how to make my bed for a year. I was like, wait, how do I do this? My person isn't here to help me do this. Like, yeah.
Right. Oh, my body has done crazy shit. I mean, I think I've held on to grief physically more than mentally, which is crazy because I feel like I've fallen off the deep end mentally. So like my body in general, just like, I mean, I had the like heart palpitations, like how they say people die from broken hearts. I swear I could
Yes.
have died from the broken heart,
Yep.
no problem. With my dad, I slept walked. With my mom, I had sleep terrors. Like, so much, so much.
Yeah.
I mean, I blew up with my mom. I have a picture of me on the beach 10 days after, and I am like unrecognizable the way
Yeah.
my face like exploded.
Yeah.
And everything. I honestly think I went like hyper like focused productive because I was the executor and I had to do it all.
Of
And then
course.
after I was done with the big stuff, like the selling of the house, I feel like my body was like, whew. And
Oh
then
yeah.
I could start to feel.
Oh
So
yeah.
even though I was feeling big feelings for the first year, it really was not even close because I was so hyper productive
And
with
I've
that
lost
other extra shit.
Yeah. And I've lost people in my life before, but like I
Mm-hmm.
remember something I became really obsessed with right after my dad died was EDMs or like not EDMs. What is it called when you like Oh,
The therapy?
NDEs. Sorry, near death experiences.
Oh.
And so
Oh yeah, that helps
oh my God.
process.
So I would read, so I just read like any book there was to know about the afterlife, because I also didn't grow up in a religious environment. So I was like, where do we go? Like, where is he? Like, I know I have his ashes,
Right.
and like that part is here, but like, where
Right.
is he? Um,
Yeah.
and
Have you ever
then
seen a medium?
yes, and I really want to talk about it.
Yeah.
I have.
Yeah.
Yes, I have twice in the last 8 years. And I'm planning to
Yeah.
see one in June. So,
Cool.
but yeah, but I became really obsessed with it because I just needed to like understand where he went. And that is kind of when, in, you know, to each their own with what they believe, but he started communicating with me through music. And now
Love.
now I have, it's like the most wonderful thing in the world, because like it always, and I know it's him because it always happens like exactly when you need it. And it's
It's like
like
not a coincidence.
not at all. Like
Yeah.
and specifically he introduced me to amazing music, and I am a huge fan of Fleetwood Mac because of him. And our favorite song was Don't Stop, because we loved the live version that they do with the USC marching band, and I loved marching bands growing up. So that was our thing. And so I never listened to that song ever. I never like voluntarily put it on because I need something. So that I
Yeah.
know that when I hear it, it's him. I know that he's like here with me, and I find great comfort in that, as well as mediums. I mean, mediums have done more for me than bereavement therapy ever did.
Yep.
And we
Yep.
can definitely talk about that, but I'm rambling.
No, no, you're not. And this is like, I mean, it's also like, let them grieve. Like,
Let
who
them
cares what anybody has to say about what you had to latch onto to make yourself get through the next day? I'm like, if you think that song is from your dad, we love that. And if someone's like, it just happens to be on, shut up.
Yeah. Oh
You
yeah.
don't get
But
to tell me.
and
You
like
don't get to tell me it's not my dad.
oh yeah, oh absolutely. And like, you know, we all agree,
Yeah.
like when one of my boyfriends broke up with me in college, I took up pole dancing. Like we all do things the way that we need to like move through
Right.
a moment. And what was the biggest detriment to me was that I did not let myself grieve until about 2 years after he passed away.
Yeah.
And you cannot move on from a moment until you move through it emotionally. And
Yeah.
because societal expectation is that every day we show up and we work hard and we do all these things, that we are not allowed to feel like that. We don't live in a feelings society. And so it gets
Right.
really hard. And then, you know, it's just, you compound it and you push it down, and then it involuntarily comes up, and then you have to deal with it. And I tell everyone when they're
Right.
going through their grief journey, whenever that starts for them, that like, you have to let yourself cry. You have to let yourself, like, whatever is coming out of you.
Yeah.
If you're angry, be angry, like, but don't pretend like everything is okay when it's not.
Right. And everyone around you is going to try and make you seem like it's going to be good, and screw them.
Yeah. It's just,
And that's exactly why we're talking about this, because it's also just like, it's okay that your coworker, their parents just died and now they're crying, and all you can do is give them a squeeze on the shoulder and let them be. Don't say anything stupid. You don't need to make them better, because it actually just makes everybody feel worse.
Oh, for sure. I will admit though that because I am a comedian, I love a good dead dad joke. And I
Yeah,
feel
we love it.
we love, like, the dead. I always am like, it's the worst club to be a part of, but I'm the president. Welcome. Here's a cookie. Like,
Yeah.
strap in.
That's it.
Yeah.
It really
Yeah.
is.
Yeah. And I saw a medium about 2 years after he passed away. And she was out on Long Island, and she was
Cool.
lovely. I know. It was on the second floor of this cute little shop, which was such a great marketing tactic for the shop, because you get out of the medium session and you're so emotional, you spend $400 on clothes, and then you get on the train and you go back into the city. That's very real. And I still have all of the clothes I bought, even though they don't fit me, because it was the most expensive shopping experience of my life. But she was great. And uh, I still remember absolutely everything she said to me. It was lovely. It was filled with love and light. And when you're finding a medium, you really need to find someone who is filled with love and light, because there are dark people out there with darker intentions, and that may not be what you
Right.
need. But she was like amazing. And I have so many things to share if you have any questions about what's happening to me in the great beyond.
Did your dad come through? Like, did you feel like she could channel that, or?
Yeah, so it was
Yeah.
the very first time it happened. She started with, and this is just between you and me sort of thing. Well, I mean, like whatever, but no one knows Dan, so you do. Um,
Yeah.
she was like, I have to ask you, before we even begin, like, are you with a man or a woman? Because the person that you love, that surrounds you with love, is a very effeminate energy. And I was like, oh, that would be my musical theater boyfriend. And and she was like, you don't get a lot of choice in life. Like a lot of things in life are already designed for you, but you do get to choose who you are in relationship with, friendship, whatever. She said, if you choose to be with him, he is your soulmate. If you choose not to be with him, he'll always be in your life, but this person is your soul flame, which is totally true. For another podcast, we had
Yeah.
many interactions before that we didn't even know about, even when I was in college. So,
Oh, that's crazy.
which is like crazy. So, and then she said that I had, I got a couple guardian angels. My Italian grandmother's always with me whenever I'm like lost or I need help. And then she was like, oh, and this guy, she's like, did your dad pass on? Because this guy just came through and pushed through everybody and was like, I'm here. I made it. I'm here. And she was like, he is larger than life. And I was like, yeah, that's probably my dad. And like so many wonderful things that were shared. He actually, halfway through this chat, this was in 2018, she was like, your dad keeps saying, like, I'm so excited about the move. I'm so excited about the move. She goes, are you moving to California? And I was like, not that I know of currently. And she was like, you're moving to California. And he's like so excited for you. He's like, you cannot give up on your comedy. He keeps like pointing to a stage with like a single microphone and a spotlight. And she's like, you're a comedian. And I was like, yeah. And she's like, you can't give up on comedy. You cannot give up on writing. You can't do it. And it was like, I was like, okay. And there were a lot of other things that we like talked about too. And I guess spirits always kind of present at like the happiest moment of their life. And like he presents at the age in which he had me and my sister.
You're
so
like, you're welcome.
Yeah. So like, and I like it just, and I had been in therapy for like 2 years with a bereavement therapist. And I like the weight that lifted off me when I left that room, knowing that there was a solution. Like I feel like sometimes in bereavement therapy, it is helpful in a lot of ways, but it's also not like it gave me a resolution that therapy could never.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
With that.
Yeah. And I'm so thankful, like being a medium is so hard. The amount of energy you have to give to another person every day. So when you see a medium and you're like, oh, holy shit, that's expensive. Good. It should be. They're literally giving their entire body and soul to you for an hour. Like you you pay it and you deal with it. Yeah. And so it was, she's of course now too busy to actually give private sessions. So I don't think I'll ever work with her again, but I'm so thankful for the freedom that she gave me.
Yeah, I feel like mediums, if, I know people are like so skeptic, but I'm like, but when you find a good one, there's like, you cannot deny it. Like the one my sister and I saw in North Jersey, like that he'll forever be our guy, where I'm like, no, we're going to him because the reading we got, I actually feel like was the first step forward in like any sense of healing that I got. Was just like his reading. I was like, okay, she is somewhere here.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, cool. She's somewhere. Step forward. But it's like, if you're not into mediums, cool. I almost think you're doing yourself a disservice. Give it a try.
Yeah.
What's the worst thing that happens? You're like, she was full of shit. Or your life will be changed. Like,
Also,
there's...
it is like society stifles creativity, right? And like mediumship and spirituality in that way is a form of creative expression. And I feel like a lot of people deny themselves the opportunity to experience that and open their minds. And like, I'm never going to do shrooms, right? But like, I love going to mediums. Like that's how I get my woohoo kicks.
Like literally same.
Yeah, it's great. And then the second time I saw a medium was 4 months after my grandmother died, which I was told was just a little too soon. Like sometimes souls need an opportunity to get settled. But it was still also like an incredible reading. And I think the difference with my Grammy's experience passing, my grandmother and I are the same person. She helped raise me. She's like one of the most important women in my life. And so I haven't grieved her as much as I've grieved my dad, because I left no crumbs, as it were. Like I literally followed her to the finish line.
Yeah, well, you had such a different experience. I mean, your dad's was basically sudden loss. And with your grandma, like you were there in the end, like seeing everything, being able to have conversations in some regard with her, being in her space. Like that's just different closure.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. And I think
quotes closure.
Yeah. When does it ever close? It doesn't happen.
It doesn't.
People die, and then you get into comedy, and that's and that's how it happens. Whenever I meet someone who's a comedian, I'm like, who died? Like, how'd you get your start? Who was it?
Yeah.
People will be like, my dog, and I'll be like, fucking knew it. But with my grandmother, it was sudden because it was during the pandemic. We really hadn't had an opportunity to like see her all that much. And my grandmother really prided herself on not needing help ever. Like she wanted to be an independent spirit. I remember one time in college, she like took me to a beach, and she's the sweetest little lady. She got very angry and indignant with me. And she was like, you have to stop telling me what to do. I know how old I am. And if I need something from you, I will let you know. And I was like, okay.
Heard.
And then I got a call on my birthday in 2021 from her neighbors who were family friends of ours, who were like, you always told me to call you when we're waving the white flag, that something is going on, and someone needs to come up. And my sister couldn't leave North Carolina. It's very complicated, and I'm going to actively choose not to get too much into it, but her kids were unavailable to take care of her. And so it was me. And it was terrible because I knew I packed up most of my life because I said that, she is my whole world. And so if something is going to happen, let me be there for the whole of it. And oh my God, when I showed up, she had vascular dementia as a result of what I think was she had a stroke around Thanksgiving and fell down a flight of stairs in her 250-year-old farmhouse. So you can imagine how steep those stairs are. And that can often onset those types of symptoms. So I show up to the house. The house is a mess. She's been feeding a squirrel in the house because she thought it was one of her cats. Yes, it was and she kept being like, what are you doing here? She just was so happy I was there, but she was like, this doesn't make sense. You should be, in New York. And it was so scary. I am, as I've said many a time in this podcast, I'm an actor, I'm a comedian, I'm not a nurse. I'm not equipped to. I have a permanent shoulder injury because one time she threw a sundowner's hissy fit and wanted to go up to her actual bedroom. and she fell on my shoulder going up the stairs, like 136 pounds of dead weight landing on my shoulder. Like, I'm just like, I wasn't in a position. And it was so funny because the first time she went to the emergency room, the 2 times, and we'll talk about this in a second, but it was literally like taking a dog to the vet to put them down. Like, that's what it felt like. But the first time she went to the doctors, I had to go, and I wasn't the health proxy and I wasn't the power of attorney, but I was there. And the doctor was like, it's always the people that aren't actually in charge that are doing the caregiving work. And I don't know if you've ever heard that before, but I was like, I had no idea. Like, and it was so nice to know that it wasn't just me, but it was just like, it was such a helpless feeling. And then the second time I sent her to the hospital, it was because the hospital had sent her home totally deconditioned. And I just couldn't take care of her. She wasn't eating. And I remember I came in one morning with, like, she loved cottage cheese and blueberries and her half a grapefruit. And I brought it into the room where she was staying in, which was the library of the house. And I like put the food down, and I was sitting with her because I wanted to make sure she ate. And she just looked at me, like, she cocked her head and she was like, this is really hard for you, isn't it? And I was like, yeah, I what am I going to do? Lie to her? I was like, it's excruciatingly painful. And so the next day, she took a turn for the worse. And I called her doctor and I said, you sent her home to me in this condition. What do I do? Because I need her to go back into the hospital. I need her family to show up for her in a way that I cannot right now. And she cannot come home. And he gave me, like, specific verbiage to call 911 to say, so that the ambulance service would come and she'd have to go into a home. And it was literally like bringing a dog to the vet to put her down because she never came out of the hospital. Yeah. And that's something I'll carry with me for the rest of my life. And she wasn't even my mother. And so, but I'm so, that was such a different grieving experience because, I mean, I saw her basically through to her second to last breath. And it was during COVID, so I couldn't go into the nursing home to see her once she had been there. And then finally, I knew she was dying. I'm going to get very emotional, I'm sorry, but
it's okay. I wish I could tell you you're on the crying couch, but you're in your own sound booth.
I'm in my own
But we love crying on this.
We love crying.
Yeah, we love crying on this podcast.
But I, like, know it's important to, like, speak on a podcast, so I'm going to try and, like, breathe through it. I had a conversation with her from the window. So I would, like, go and I would stand outside the window. I would call the nursing home. They would transfer me to her phone and she would sit in a chair and she would talk to me. And towards the end, she really only recognized me, because I was, like, constantly around her all the time. But we were chatting and I was talking to her because it was so important for me that she saw my wedding dress before she passed away. And so, by some fucking miracle, this dress I saw on Pinterest that I wanted was in a bridal shop in Portland, Maine, 45 minutes away from my grandmother. I was like, I don't care how much this costs. I'm buying it. I want her to see it. Yeah. So I was telling her about it. And I was like, oh, I'm so excited for the wedding. And I said, I wish that you were going to be there. And she, like, the absolute crazy lady she was like, oh, Alexis, like, I'll be right here. Oh. And that's when I knew she was going to go. Because she had stopped eating. Yeah. She wasn't interested. She was just listening to her. She loves classical music. She was a classical musician. And I ran into the nursing home. And they were like, ma'am, you can't be in here. I was like, my grandmother is dying. And you guys are making me stand in 4 feet of snow in my fucking dance goes. Talking to her from the window. Like, I'm not going to make her sick. just let me into their room to be with her. And so they did. And they she must have forgotten like that we had been chatting outside. So I came in and they were like, "Look, Judy, like, look who's here to see you. It's Alexis." And she was like, "Oh boy." She like gave me the biggest hug. I swear to God, she held me for like 15 minutes. And then she closed her eyes and she died like 2 days later. She never woke up for anybody. And she passed away. And I feel my mom was able to be with her when she passed away. And I think that was really important for her, because she loved my grandmother.
Yeah.
So much. But then like after that happened, it was such a weird thing to be like, okay, well, my job's done now. Here I
Well,
go
right.
back
And now,
to
like,
New
okay.
York. Like, here I go back to New York now, after doing this like, huge, crazy thing. And so I saw a medium after that happened, and it was very new, but she had said like she and my dad had like a very secret friendship. They would meet like my parents divorced when I was very young, and they would meet like every Thursday at Cape Ann Bagel and Coffee, and they'd sit and they'd get a coffee and a muffin together, and they'd catch up. And like, I guess the medium told me that my dad was the first person to like receive her, which I just thought was like so beautiful. And then she said she was hanging out with my dad, or with my grandfather in in a canoe on a lake in Maine in front of a cabin, and they used to spend their summers in Damerscott in this little cabin on a lake, on Damerscott Lake, and so like it was like very healing to have that experience. But I actively cry about it, but I don't miss her with the same sort of like, I'm trying to think of the right word. I don't miss her in the way that I miss my dad.
Yeah. It's just different. It's different loss.
It is different
And, like,
loss.
I mean,
her
and
loss
parent also.
Yeah, but her loss has changed the way I operate in the living world, if that makes any sense. Like, yeah, just my relationship to my family has changed, and I definitely think that the last of my innocence went with that experience in life. I was like,
well,
okay.
yeah, that's like a level of adulting that like you don't necessarily see in your late 20s.
Yeah.
You know, like, yeah, most people don't see end of life care as the only person doing it, especially during a pandemic. Like, that's not a very common experience.
God bless Dan. There were like some funny moments in all of it that I look back on and think of fondly. Like, this is going to sound dark, but my grandmother had a broken neck, which I didn't know about until the second time she went into the hospital. And it had been broken since she had gone down the stairs in November. But she would fall out of bed and then not be able to get up. And I had set up baby cameras all over the house because I was like, dementia, she could go out. We live in the middle of nowhere right now, in Newfield, Maine. And I woke up one morning, I couldn't find her anywhere in the house. And I was like, oh my God, she got outside. Like, what's going to happen? And then all of a sudden I hear, yoo-hoo, yoo-hoo, which is like so my Grammy. And I'm like, Grammy, where are you? She's like, I'm over here. And I came in and she was like laying on the floor face down. She had been there for hours and she still had like
not you
a wild sense of humor about it. She was just like, but I was so thankful to have Dan in my corner. Dan changed her diapers and helped her clean herself and made sure we had food and would take over when I just like, my body physically gave up on her. And so I'll be so incredibly thankful for him and what he gave me in that. But I do think that and this is my hot take on death and grief, I think that death is a gift. I would not be the person that I am if it weren't for the profound loss that I have experienced. And I'm so,
Yeah.
so thankful for that. And I think that if, not that I mean, we all die, right? That's not something we
Yeah.
talk about as a society. Like, we're all going at some point. And
Right.
for me in LA, I fear it is from death by Maserati. Like, the people out here drive terribly, but like, we're all gonna go. And I think it's so important to just be open and have these conversations and and be there for people when they ask for it. And saying,
Right.
I don't know, I'm sure everyone goes through this when people die, but it's like, if you need anything from me, please let me know. If I can do anything for you, please let me know. You fucking cash in on every single one of those. Hey, you know how you said that there was something you needed me to do, like to do for me? I absolutely need a coffee this morning, and I just don't know how I'm going to get through it if you don't do it for me. Like, you know, it is like, I'm rambling and I lost my train of thought. But what I'm trying to say
You're not,
is,
because this was kind of leading into the next question I was going to have for
oh,
you.
great. Go. What is
Which
it?
is like, which is like, you know, if you had a word like support for or advice for the griever in a setting where, because, you know, it's always like the aftermath of like, just let someone grieve the way they need to grieve. Do you have a word of advice for the griever, and do you have a word of advice for the support system? And how to just let people be, or like you said, cash in on every one of those, because I had another guest be like, don't ask, just do it. And then here's the segue in of, and if people are asking, cash in.
Oh, 100%. You know, it's very interesting. We're having, my best childhood friend lost her dad 2 days ago. And he was an incredible guy. What an interesting life. Like, I feel so terribly for just the amount of crap that her family's going to have to go through for the next couple years, having experienced it myself. Like, it just, it sucks. But I told her, like, if people are offering to give you miles so you can fly home, take them. If they're offering to give you money to help offset, because has an incredible food truck, and I want to plug it at the end of this.
Please.
Yes. Like, if people are offering things, take it. Take it, because the people that show up for you in times of celebration and in times of grief are the people you always want in your corner. And if you, and all people want to do in times of grief, though it's hard to see when you're in the inside of it, is that people just want to help. And people just want to make it easy for you. And I spent 2 years being like, I'm fine. I don't need anything. Me. And then it got to the point where I actually started grieving and I needed things, but like, the time had passed for me to ask for the things that I wanted, because that is how society works. So like, when people offer things, you have to take it and know that, and everybody talks about this, but you are going to grieve for the rest of your life.
Right.
It never goes away. I had a dream about my dad like a couple weeks ago, and I think that it was because he's like very happy I'm here and doing this thing he always wanted to do and all that. But like, I cried all day because it felt so real. And I realized
that happened to me 2 weekends ago. I had a dream and I was a fucking mess all day.
Yeah, but just, it's
dreams. Damn.
Yeah, but it's just
so
important. It's so important to know. So like, cash in on the things when they're offered to you, and like, know that it doesn't get better. It really doesn't. And I feel so incredibly lucky that I have the support system that I do have. Like, my family is my friends, and I love them without condition. I would do anything for any of them, even friends that I like don't really talk to anymore, because of the way that they have showed up for me in times when I really needed them. And so, And to the support systems,
Yeah.
I think that there is a way to think that you're being a support system, and there's a way to actually be a support system. And I really, really felt that when I was like actively caregiving for my grandmother. The people that showed up for me during that time were not really my family. They were my
Mm.
friends. They were the people that carried me home drunk in college. They were the people that worked with me in my first, if you can make it here, you can make it anywhere, New York serving job.
Yeah.
Those, because they meant what they said what they meant, and they did what they said they were going to do.
Right.
And if you're going to be a support system, be a fucking support system, or don't be there at all. And I think that probably sounds pretty harsh, but it's
But it's not
true.
about them. It's about the griever.
It
So,
is
like,
about
you know,
it is 100% about the griever. And
so
like,
if you don't think you can be there for someone like that, then just don't say that you can
then
be.
just,
Just like,
yep.
just send a $5 Venmo for coffee and excuse yourself. Don't say like, I'm going to come on Saturday and we're going to, and then like come up with
Because
like some loosey goosey plans.
some people can't handle the conversation of death. Some people just aren't good at it. Some people can't do hospitals. Like, some people
Mm.
can't do. Now I feel like I've gotten so good at grief. I feel like it's like a second job. Like, how can I
Right.
help? How can I grieve? How can I grieve with you? Like,
Right.
but yeah. So, does that answer your question? I think, like,
I think it does. And I think it's an interesting take that I don't necessarily have any life experience on is like my people, for the most part, die pretty suddenly. So, like,
yeah.
I don't have the like, it almost sounds like your support system started showing up for you in your grief before your like grandmother even died. I mean, like, it doesn't sound like that it applies as much with your dad, but with your
It does.
grandmother
It does.
specifically.
Yeah, it does a little bit, because my dad told me he was terminal about 2 weeks before he passed away. And at the
Yeah.
time, I was living with Jelani, and which I'm just so thankful for who he was for me during that time. And then these two lovely people named Susan and Orville, who I still talk to twice a month, 8 years later, and I visit them once a year, at least, if I can. They were like they were board members of the theater, and so they housed actors before they had housing.
Yeah.
And I remember I got off the phone with my dad, and Susan was gardening, and I was just like, Susan, Susan. And I came running over to her. I was in like this like patch of sunflowers, and I just collapsed, and she just held me. And then Orville has like adopted me. Like, we talk, like, he's a friend, but also
Yeah.
he's like a grandfather to me. We talk like politics, we talk aliens, we talk whiskey, we talk. He's just like they're just the most amazing people, and I don't know that I would have been able to go through those last couple weeks if it weren't for them.
Right.
Yeah.
So it does. So then it applies for both, which is just
Yeah.
like, especially with, you know, illness and stuff like that. It's like you can show up before the inevitable.
And
Like, please show up before, right?
Well,
like,
you should,
especially when you know that's going to happen. Show up before. Don't like show up and then try to like make up for some lost time. Like, be there, cook something. I don't know. Offer to drive me somewhere. Like,
yeah.
just show up.
And we talk all the time about, or we talk, but like, there's just this thing that happens where like we show up at the funeral. We
Right.
show
It's like,
up at the funeral. You had 80 years to show up, or you had 40 years to show up, or you had like just be there, because you don't get the opportunity to do that when someone is gone. And you
right.
don't get the opportunity to do that for your people when your
Yeah.
people's people go. Like,
Yeah.
yeah. That's a conversation for another day. But I'm very big on unconditional love in grief.
Yeah, 100%. Well, and it's also because you've seen it at the end, and you're like, wow. And that's either how you left the situation, which is pretty shitty, or you know, like, oh, now that this person's gone, you wish you could, but it's like, well, it's too late, unfortunately, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I just, you know, feel like there are many ways people think scenarios should go, and like, it's pretty simple. It's like, just be transparent. Like, I always tell people, like, you know, how you said about like hospitals or whatever, like, I can't be that person for you. In your grief, I will not be at the hospital unless it is your last breath, and just know that I'm so unwell, but I will try to be there.
Yeah.
I'm very transparent. But if I can be the friend that also, when you get back from said hospital, can show up with like a hot meal, that will be where I come in. But like, know yourself also. Like, not everyone's capable. Not everyone has lived through the experience yet.
Yeah.
Bless them. Like, you know, so when it does come to that time, like, just be real with yourself so that you're not making it about yourself to the person who's actually sad.
It's so funny that you say that, because I am I'm a true double Capricorn. And if you don't know what that means in astrology, I am the loyal person you will
Yeah.
ever find in your life. And if you are in the hospital, I'm there. I'm wiping your butt. I am fixing your hair. But I'm not necessarily the person that is going to show up with a home cooked meal, just because um, I'd rather be there for you in the weird way that you could be
In
there
a different way.
in a different
Yes.
way. Yeah, for sure.
100%. Well, I think this is a great conversation. I feel like we have so many other micro conversations we could pull from this. So
Oh
you'll
yeah.
have to come back and chat with me more.
I would love that. And thank you so much for giving people a space to do this. I don't know if you know Nora McNamee, who did Terrible Thanks for Asking.
No.
She's a podcaster. I highly recommend you listen to it, to anybody. She's recently stopped because for her grieving journey is taking her in a different direction.
Yeah.
And that's okay. But I found her podcast shortly after my dad passed away, and she just, in the way that you are doing, she gives people a grief platform to talk about it. It's not necessarily death, it's other things. It's like death and
Mm-hmm.
other things. But it is so important that you are giving people a space to speak, a space to listen. The podcast is great.
Thanks.
You're welcome. But yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's so important.
Yeah,
This
well,
work
it's
is
just like,
important.
why aren't we talking about it? You know what I mean? Like, how you had been like, I haven't talked about this in so long. It's like, let's talk about it all the time.
You need to have an episode in your season of The Business of Death where you
Oh,
bring in like a death doula, or you bring in,
I know
it's
one. He's an
what?
actor.
Oh,
He's an
so
actor.
cool. The woman who does my taxes every year is a death doula, and she's so cool. Like, I love
See,
her.
and like, that's where I wish, I honestly, because my processing, like you said, like yours was, you know, going to mediums or the songs or whatever. I looked up death doulas. I know how everybody's embalmed. Don't you got questions? Come to me. I got all the
Yes.
answers. But one of them was like end of life, and I was like, wow, I feel like I could do that or be a funeral planner, but at the same time, I'm still way too emotional. Like, I don't think I could actually do it. Like,
Yeah.
whatever the death doulas are doing is such like an interesting, beautiful, selfless job that I'm just like, I don't
Yeah.
know how they do that
Yeah. It's
in a non-emotional way.
It's incredible.
So yeah.
You brought up something that made me want to say that this like very last button thing, which is like something that I felt was so beautiful about both my dad's passing and my grandmother's passing. And also I've lost my grandfather too during this time. But it was like it didn't impact me in the way that these two did. Though I love him to pieces, and he's changed a lot of lives because he was a teacher. But the body knows what to do. when you die.
Mm.
And whether it's sudden, whether it's like your body systematically shuts down in a way that makes your passing peaceful for you, even if it happens very terribly. And I mean, I could also be wrong, but from my experience of watching people die in front of my eyeballs, your body shuts down in a way that allows you to go. Like, there is a system, if you talk to like hospice nurses and stuff, there is just like things that all bodies do when they are getting ready to leave the world. You've got your glimmer.
Yeah.
You've got the urge to go grocery shopping or pack your suitcases, or you're going on vacation, or, you know, you're talking on the phone to your buddies and you're going to go visit them soon. And then like you stop eating and then you go to sleep and then you pass away. And it's like, I think that what a gift that our bodies give us, even when death happens and we don't expect it. Like, I just think that is such a beautiful notion.
Well, I hope so, because, you know, I don't want to know where I'm going and when.
Yeah.
Knock me out. I'm like, hey, Bonnie, whatever you do, turn your brain off first.
Yeah, turn the brain off first.
Yeah.
Please.
So let all receptors off. Yeah, truly. Like, system shutdown, but from the top, preferably. So I don't have any idea.
Yes.
Yeah. So the business of death will definitely happen, because I think that there's just that could be a whole 5 million seasons. It probably won't be a season, or it'll be a season of just like a full year, because there's just so much to talk about.
Yeah.
But, well, girlfriend, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
From the West Coast.
Yes.
Wait, real quick. Plug the food truck. Where's the food truck at?
Oh, gosh. So all my friends are doing such incredible things, but I feel in light of my bestie's recent loss that it's important to plug her business. It's called No Clucks PDX, and it's like a gay Chick-fil-A, and it's a queer-friendly vegan food truck that does like vegan, you know, chicken sandwiches and 90s themed soft serves, and she's got like an incredible brand. You can look her up on Instagram. It's No Clucks PDX. And you know, whether you want to like Venmo to buy someone a meal there, or whatever you can do to help her business, I think it's just sometimes community finds us, and I think you know, she's got an amazing business going, but also she's a wonderful person, and she needs support right now. So
I think that's a great idea. And who doesn't love Chick-fil-A? But gay! And you know who will hate that? Chick-fil-A, but screw them.
Absolutely.
You know what, Chick-fil-A?
Yeah.
We can all do chicken. Get out of here.
Yeah, totally. Thank you so much, Bonnie.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for joining me. I'm sure I'll be asking you to come back and chat again. If you'll have me.
If you'll have me, I'm ready. Does tomorrow work? Let's keep going. There's just so many things you can talk about. There's like there's so many things. And when you do the business of death, I would love to come on and talk about the caregiving experience from a non-doctor perspective, just like things you can do to like take care of yourself and stuff. Like, I'd love to chat about that.
100%. That would be a great idea, because I've got very little life experience in that end, so I'll definitely need somebody to come share. So, all right, you guys. Well, that's the episode. Check us out in 2 weeks. I don't know what we'll be chatting about in 2 weeks, but we'll be doing it. So, bye.